Hey, what's up? This is Chosen, and this is going to be a Diablo 4 video showcasing a playstyle for the Rogue that you can aspire to blast through content insanely efficiently and farm extremely effectively, and also very easy to play. So I'm going to walk you through the gearing process, the stats to look for, the different aspects that are going to be placed on your gear and what you want to look for in those, and then also the skill tree and the Paragon board so that you can take advantage of the Rogue Trapper playstyle with twisting blades. Let's get into it. Alrighty, now even if you haven't played a Rogue yet, or if you're considering playing a Rogue, they are an insanely consistent class. And if you're thinking about playing them for Season 1, they would be a great choice because they are probably the most overall just consistent. Early game, mid game, end game, they are very, very strong, and they have a very linear scale to them as they're leveling up and progressing. So let's go ahead and pull up the gear over here on the right, and we'll talk about the different things to look for as you're building, and we'll just kind of go in order. So for the helm right here, you can see we definitely want cooldown reduction. Now after that, we're looking at things like life and armor, and there's a little bit of flexibility there, but you really want to get cooldown reduction on your helm for sure. And the aspect that we're going with on the helm is going to be the one that gives you the barrier for damaging elites. Then if we go to the chest armor, what we're looking for here is just a ton of damage reduction. You can see that we're getting it from close enemies. We're going to be up close and personal, dashing through and doing twisting blades, so that's great. Damage reduction, just all of the damage reduction stats you can get. And then we have got the disobedience aspect because it is so consistent and great for toughness. It is very good in tons of different builds in Diablo 4. It's the one where you gain armor that stacks up while you're dealing damage. With the Rogue, we're always hitting things, we're always doing damage, and you can get a ton of toughness out of disobedience. When you're progressing, if you find that you're super squishy and you're dying a lot, honestly, there's lots of builds in Diablo 4 that you can consider placing the disobedience aspect on your amulet to get that bonus and get even more armor and more toughness and more sustain. Then on the gloves, we're going with crit chance, and very important to get a really good roll of twisting blades on our gloves with the attack speed and the lucky hit. And the aspect that we're going for is direct damage to vulnerable enemies, has a 45% chance to daze them for 2 seconds. Then for our pants, it's going to be a little bit similar to the chest armor. We're just going to be looking for a ton of damage reduction right here, and you can see we're stacking life as well. And then we've also got damage reduction from enemies that are poisoned, because we're going to be keeping that up pretty consistently here on the build. And then we get a lot more damage reduction by using basic skills with our legendary aspect right there on the pants. Okay, so then for the boots, we're going to be stacking a bunch of movement speed and then also making sure to get energy cost reduction on them as well, with the legendary aspect being the Shadow Step 1 that gives us the additional charge and then has the other stacking bonuses there of up to 30%. Then on the amulet, we're going to be looking for movement speed and cooldown reduction for sure. Energy cost reduction and also damage reduction to close is great because, again, we're always up there in close quarters. And then for the legendary aspect, there's a few different ways you can go on the amulet. Now, I think that this is a good choice right here because it gives us a super consistent vulnerable, which obviously vulnerable is amazing in Diablo 4. So if we put that on our amulet, you can see that dealing direct damage to enemies affected by trap skills is going to have a 45% chance to make them vulnerable for 3 seconds. So it's just going to make the build be a lot lazier and a lot more consistent. For the rings, it's going to be mostly what you'd expect. We want the crit chance, the crit damage, the vulnerable damage, and resource generation. And then the aspect we're going to be putting on our rings. First one is going to be skills deal up to 20% increased damage based on the primary resource. And then right here on our second ring, we're also going to be going for crit chance, vulnerable damage, and crit damage. You can see I've got a life roll. There's a little bit of flexibility on that 4th slot on your rings, but you definitely want the crit chance, crit damage, and vulnerable damage. And then we've also got the restore primary resource when you crowd control an enemy, which is going to have a lot of different ways that we synergize the days and stuff like that within this build. So then for our bow weapon over on the left, we're taking vulnerable damage, damage to close, crit damage, all stats, and then obviously our twisting blades, blade dancer aspect right there. And then for our 2 daggers over on the right side, going to be exactly what you would expect: vulnerable damage, crit damage, damage to close, dex. And then for the aspects we're going with is going to be the synergy and also the accelerating here, which is going to give us the crit chance with core skills, is going to increase attack speed. And then we're going to place all emeralds in our weapons, along with placing either ruby or topaz in our gear. Topaz is great because it's going to help give us a lot of DR while we're crowd controlled, and usually when you're going to get in tough situations, you're going to be crowd controlled. And then we'll head on down to the skill bar, and we're obviously going to go with Inner Sight right here to help give us unlimited energy procs. And then on our bar, we're going to be going with Dash, Shadow Step, Death Trap, Poison Trap as our 4 abilities. Our left click right here is Puncture, and then our right click, the main thing we're going to be spamming all over the place, is Twisting Blades. And that leads us into going over the skill tree that I'll walk you through really quickly here. On our basic, we're going to be taking Puncture and taking both the Enhanced, and then down on the bottom one, the Fundamental Puncture. And what this is going to do is gain 2 energy when we hit a crowd controlled enemy. And then we're also going to throw blades that are each going to hit and make vulnerable for 2 seconds. Really consistent vulnerable procking here from the basic. Then as we come down here to the core skills, obviously we're going to be getting as high of a skill on Twisting Blades as we can, and then we'll be taking the enhanced version of that, and then we'll come down here on the bottom and take this one where when Twisting Blades return to you, active cooldowns are reduced by 0.10 seconds per enemy they pass through, up to 2 seconds. And as we're constantly moving around and dashing around the map, these Twisting Blades are going to be returning to us and hitting those cooldowns. So that is obviously the one we want to go with there to be super consistent while we're farming. And then we're going to take actually both of these two. We're going to take Sturdy and Siphoning right here, because Sturdy, we're going to gain damage reduction, and then Siphoning Spikes right here heal for 3% of your maximum life when you critically strike close enemies. As you can see right here, we are in Blind Burrows, and let me go ahead and shrink my camera and everything and show you the sustain. So look at the health globe right here, and look at how good our sustain is. Like, look how poisoned we are, and it just doesn't even matter. The potions staying right there at 9 out of 9. No problem at all. We're just tanking all of this poison in Blind Burrows, and no matter how low our health globe is getting, it's no problem. We're going to be able to heal it back up. We have the constant siphoning of life. Look at that. Look how low our globe is getting, and no problem. It just keeps right on filling up. Look how low it's getting. Nope, we're good. By the time it goes down, we will have recovered by then, and we can just keep right on flowing with no issues. And the main reason is right here because of the Siphoning Spikes. Let me open that back up. Right here because of the Siphoning Spikes that are going to give us this heal for 3% of your maximum life when you critically strike close enemies. It's an insane heal and a massive source of sustain, especially if you want to be running a dungeon like Blind Burrows where you have those constant poison procs hitting you. But then we're going to slide on over to the right, and we're going to take Critically Striking Enemy grants 5% movement speed for 4 seconds. Obviously, we want to stack movement speed when we're trying to farm effectively. And we're going to be taking Shadow Step with the Enhanced, and then also the Methodical over here on the left, where enemies damaged by Shadow Step are stunned. So we just keep proccing that CC and double dipping all of the things like resource generation and everything that we get from those CC effects. And Shadow Step is also going to increase our crit strike chance against the enemy that we hit with Shadow Step by 8% for 3 seconds, which is huge. We want to be critting as often as possible. And then we're going to take our 3 stacks of Weapon Mastery. Obviously, it's just a multiplier for our damage. Same concept as like Glass Cannon for a Sorcerer or something like that. We're going to put 1 point into Dash so that we have a little bit more mobility, and we can proc a little bit of those Twisting Blades effects as they are returning to us for sure. And then we're going to put 3 stacks in Concussive, where after knocking back or knocking down an enemy, we gain a crit chance against them for 3 seconds. We'll put 1 point into our Trick Attacks when you critically strike a dazed enemy, knocked down for half a second. And we'll also put 1 point in Rapid Gambits, where your evade cooldown is reduced by 0.5 every time you daze an enemy. And then we'll keep coming down the skill tree. We'll put 1 in Poison Trap to get that onto our bar, and then we'll also have the synergy of knocking down enemies for 2 seconds when it activates. And we're going to put 6 points in Exploit and Malice, because what it's going to give us is another multiplier to our damage on both ends of that spectrum, and also a multiplier to Vulnerable, which is just an amazing 6 points we can spend there to help us scale up. And then as we keep sliding on down to the bottom right, we're going to put a couple points into this stuff over here on the right, the Deadly Venom, and then we're going to max out the Debilitating just to give us more DR, help us keep rolling, because we have the Sustain. We don't got to worry about that. We're getting life back. So that's why you see us kind of prioritizing stacking some damage reduction, because as long as they can't like one-shot us, if we're in a situation where we have an opportunity to sustain, Healing is not the problem. We've got that covered. So stacking a little bit of DR is going to help us be super consistent. And then almost done, but we come down here to the bottom under the ultimates. And the one we're going to take is going to be Death Trap. And this is awesome because it's also, you see the enemies are pulled into Death Trap when it activates. And then we also want to make sure we take if Death Trap kills the enemy. Its cooldown is reduced by 10 seconds just to keep those ultimates cycling through. And we've actually got a few that we want to put a lot of points in here. We have got the Innervation, which gives us lucky hits, a chance to gain energy and give us a lot more consistent resource. Plus, we want to take Trap Mastery, which is when Poison Trap or Death Trap activate, you gain 12% increased crit chance against vulnerable and crowd control enemies for 4 seconds. Amazing. And we'll take a couple into Aftermath, which is more energy and more resource for us. And we want to put 1 point in Adrenaline so we can get down here to Haste and get a lot more max energy and movement speed and attack speed and all the synergies we get from that. And then lastly, for our key passive, we're going to take Exposure because what it's going to do is give us cooldowns on our traps. We're trying to speed farm. We're trying to get through the dungeon fast, lots of movement speed, lots of resource generation, lots of healing, DR, and cycling through our ultimate and our traps and all of that. So getting cooldown here from our key passive is going to really help us cycle through and be super consistent as we're clearing. Okay, then for the Paragon board, I'm not going to bore you and walk you through this for 45 minutes, but I'm going to give you the general breakdown. And as always with my build videos, I've got a link down below to the build planner if you want to see what we've got going on here while theory crafting this build. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out and we're going to put Closer in our first board right here. Our second board is going to be Deadly Ambush, and we're going to put Exploit in there. Our third board is going to be Cheap Shot, and we're going to put in Combat. And then we're going to come up here. Our fourth board is going to be Tricks of the Trade, and we're going to put in Turf. And then our fifth and final board is going to be No Witnesses, and we're going to put in Ambush. And the Paragon board is pretty straightforward. I mean, you're kind of going through and taking your glyphs, but there are a couple things you want to go out of your way for, obviously, like trap cooldown reduction right here on these two magic nodes. You want to come down here and get 5% damage to enemies affected by trap skills. So there's some random things you're going to kind of go out of the way for. We've got damage to crowd-controlled enemies. We've got 30% damage to crowd-controlled enemies and armor, so giving us more sustain while we heal up our life. Lots of pretty good rare nodes here on the board. So I would take a couple minutes to kind of go through and look it over. And like I said, I'm providing the link down below. So if you really want to go through and just follow this node for node, you can zoom in, compare it to yours in game, and go through and pick all of it up. But the glyphs we're going to be leveling are Closer, Combat, Exploit, Turf, and Ambush. So yeah, if you follow this build, you are going to be crushing it on the Rogue. And like I said earlier, Rogue is an insanely consistent class and very breezy, easy play style from early game, mid game to end game. You'll be breezing through those 40s and 50s all the way up to like Nightmare level 60. Now, admittedly, you're going to want a different build that I'll try to cover here on the channel. If you're trying to push into like higher content, it's going to be a little bit different than the general utility speed farming kind of build, but I'm trying to branch out and cover as many classes as I can here on the channel with as many different builds so you can see how they all shape up against each other, and I can give you some perspective as to how all of them are going to be in terms of strengths and weaknesses. But for the speed farming build for the Rogue, it is absolutely incredible, and it's going to be very popular as a season starter, I believe, in season 1, just because of how consistent it is from start to mid to end. And like I said, I will put a link down below to the build planner if you want to be able to pull it up on your end and look through as you're trying to copy this build in game to do this version of the Rogue. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, it would mean a lot to earn your subscription down below. But as always, I appreciate all of you, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll see you soon in the next video. Peace.